Hi everyone, welcome. Many of you might already know which system we're going to be working on when you see me wearing these two gloves and when you see this plastic lined piece of cardboard. But before we get started working on the bin of mixed red worms that live in the twine bedding, let me just show you something that I encountered when I came down here to start setting up for today's video. I was pulling the bin off the shelf, bringing it over here to the bench, and I was startled by a large flying insect buzzing by. I startled the little guy as I grabbed the container to bring it over here, and it was a pretty good sized black soldier fly. It's very easy to grab these little guys. They're pretty docile, and even though they look pretty big and scary, they have no stinger. They don't even have mouth parts. They don't eat anything. They turn into a full-fledged flying insect after crawling out of their little shell. And I don't know if it's a shell. I guess it's their skin in the beginning when they're still a larva, and then they transform into one of these little guys. The larger one was the one that I startled when I bought the bin over here, and then I looked up at the window and I found this other one, this slightly smaller sized one. And their only job is to find another black soldier fly after they grow to this stage. That's part of the reason they don't even have mouth parts, because they're not even in this form long enough to ever need to eat anything. Their only job is to mate, drop off some eggs, and then that pretty much concludes their life. So I'm not the type to go running for the fly swatter when I see something like that in my bins. My tendency is to try to capture the little guy and bring them outside, as we've done in the past with the larvae when we would find them. These came in from the system that was recently harvested, the Outdoor Worm Bag version 6.0, whose inhabitants were used to launch off another system, which is over a month old now. But we're not here to talk about the Outdoor Worm Bag or the new bin of worms that were launched with those worms. We're here to deal with the red wigglers that live in this system. Wait a second. Yeah. There are red wigglers in here, but not only red wigglers. Like I said earlier, this is the bin of mixed red worms. And the mixed red worm combination consists of red wigglers, Indian blue worms, and European night crawlers. And the one thing that sets this system apart is the fact that we used a whole bunch of twine rope to build this environment for them. And I'm assuming we'll be able to locate some of the twine right here on the surface. Here's a little thin piece of it. Very fragile, tears apart without any effort. Here's even some more. And the main reason for me wearing two gloves is because the twine started out very thick. 3 strands wrapped up tight, and when you would take those 3 strands apart, each of those 3 strands could be unwound as well. So, as I've done in the past, I didn't do it the last time. I kind of forego. What's the past tense of forego? Forewent? Did I forewent? I had foregone the thing that we'd been doing in the past, which is attempting to unravel as much of the stuff as we can so that it would become easier for the worms to break the stuff down. In the very beginning, when we started this system, the twine would pretty much hold together throughout the entire container, so much so that I can just like grab a piece of it and pretty much lift up the entire contents, the entire bedding, and then we'd be able to peek in underneath. And over the time that this system's been in service, they've really done a number on the twine. They've broken it down for the most part. Man, these grapes go back 2 feedings. We were a little bit surprised to bump into them the last time we came in here. And I had talked about maybe breaking them apart. Perhaps they were still sort of protected by their skins, resulting in the worms being unable to eat this stuff. So even though we mentioned wanting to do that, we never did. And the grapes that we encountered last time ended up just going right back down into the feeding zone without me bursting them or breaking them or anything like that. So this time, if we find grapes, I think it's probably best that we do try to help them along in the breakdown process by busting them apart. I mean, this one here you could see has already been broken open. Kind of weird. I don't understand why some of these grapes are holding out so good. In the past, every time I've fed grapes, they just get gobbled up 1, 2, 3, but these grapes, for whatever reason, don't seem to be as interesting for the worms. It is so odd for me to be working with two hands, because I always keep my right hand unsoiled so that I can use it to manipulate the camera. But since I had hoped to spend a little bit of time unraveling twine today, I figured I would start right out by putting the glove on both hands so that I'm able to get right into it. I guess I was a little bit surprised by how damp things were in here. I started out by showing that plastic covered cardboard because that had been the covering here up until the last check-in, when we decided that things were just a little bit too damp and it was probably time to let the system begin drying off a little bit. So we opted to leave off the plastic covering. And that newspaper covering that was on here ended up becoming its replacement. I didn't have that ready to go. I had set that up after the fact. And my furnace just kicked on. It's been very chilly over the past few days and soggy, rainy. But I guess that's an interesting segue right into the whole dampness topic. In the past, during the whole winter time, I had always kept my spray bottle nearby just in case it felt like things in my bins were getting a little bit too dry and that perhaps the system would benefit from me supplementing the moisture by spraying some water in there. But the spray bottle's gotten very little use lately because, with the exception of the past couple days when things cooled down a lot, it's been warming up a lot. Many days where the people you see out on the street and stuff are just wearing shorts and sandals and, you know, enjoying the warming weather. But it has cooled down enough and it's been breezy that the furnace has been kicking on here and there. But in the winter time, when the furnace is running pretty regularly, the moisture in the house becomes, at least in the air, the humidity in the air becomes quite low, and the dryness of the air has this tendency to draw moisture out of things, such as my worm bins. So it's always a kind of a vigilance thing to make sure that we're keeping an eye on our systems to make sure that the climate control's not creating excess dryness in the worm bins, and then supplementing the lack of moisture with a little bit of a squirt from the spray bottle. But as the furnace runs less and less and the air hangs on to its humidity more and more, there's a much lower likelihood of my systems having their moisture sucked out by the dry air in the house. So the increased humidity in the air has definitely resulted in many of my systems becoming much more damp, such as this system. And a lot of times the easiest thing to do is just to let the system breathe. Get the plastic covers off, swap them out for paper, or at least that's what I do. In some cases I even leave the system completely uncovered. So there's very few pieces of twine remaining that require unraveling, I'm finding. I figured if we were to find any more that still need to be unwrapped, then we would do so. I mean, you saw me working here. I was definitely finding pieces and unraveling them while I was chit-chatting with you guys. Oh, here's a little bundle of other kind of string that I thought I would try sticking into the worm bin. I'm questioning whether it's really going to go anywhere, because this is that string that you usually find a box wrapped up in, or at least tied shut with, when you go to the bakery and you buy a little cake or something and they stick it in the box and they use that white cottony twine to close the box. And that stuff's been in here for some time. I thought it would be quickly and easily broken down by the worms, but perhaps it's made of a material that's resistant to that sort of stuff. I'm not going to pull it out. We'll leave it in here. Maybe it's just a matter of time before it finally gets soft enough that I could at least break it, but I assume that at some point, if it doesn't even get soft enough for me to break, then it's most likely never going to even get soft enough for the worms to be able to nibble on and consume. So perhaps its fate eventually will be that it just gets removed without making any progress here in the worm bin, but I'm not against giving it a little bit more time to see what becomes of it. So we've definitely amassed a pretty good collection of twine here. Well, it's not that much considering the whole system used to be built of this stuff and was everywhere prior to getting broken down by the worms. But I think we've probably spent enough time here that we should really get the show on the road, take care of giving them their feeding, and let them get back to work. So what we've really got going on here is a configuration that many people consider to be a continuous flow system, or at least that's what it's meant to mimic. The whole concept of continuous flow is that you feed on one edge of the bin, and as you saw, this was the edge of the bin was where the feeding activity has been going on. And the opposite edge of the bin is left without that sort of activity. It's just castings, and presumably the worms are going to continue to come in the direction of the bin, or the direction of the side of the bin where the food is getting applied regularly, and the opposite side becomes kind of depopulated, so much so that you can simply go in there and scoop out castings and sort of harvest the stuff in real time. And as you continue to supplement bedding and food on the opposite edge, you find that you've made yourself room on the other edge by simply harvesting castings, and then it's almost like a perpetual system that never needs to be formally harvested or worms migrated or anything like that. It just keeps running that way in an ongoing fashion. So I've taken what little bit of stuff we managed to gather and placed it over there on the far edge of the system. This is the seed out of a mango. We found a couple pumpkin stems. The moisture in here is extremely high, almost making me wonder if I might want to not even put the paper covers back on. But you know, I'm not in a real rush here. Even though this is amongst my oldest systems, in fact the only other systems that I have are older than this is my Vermibag Mini, which is just also a continuous system that really doesn't have any sort of end date target. It just could perpetually go and go, since it too is a continuous type setup. And the only other systems that I have that are older besides the Vermibag Mini are a couple tubs in which we've already initiated the migration of the worms out of their finished castings a couple weeks ago. So at some point this wedge configuration or this continuous flow configuration could potentially just be transformed into an active migration of the worms, so that we would try to do a haul out and get the worms working on a nice fresh new environment somewhere. But for now, I'm just going to let it ride, let it keep going. I guess in a way, in the back of my mind, one of my goals here is to see the twine get consumed. And once that's a done deal, I would start feeling like that this is possibly a system that's actually done and ready to be harvested, and time for the worms to be moved on to a new place. So guess what I just did? I just backfilled the feeding area without ever giving them their food. Gosh, I am such an airhead. So let's see if we can make up for my lack of attention by bringing in the foods that I've got for them. So what I have here is from the freezer. I emptied a plastic bag in which this food was. This stuff came from my mom for the most part, and I'm not adding bedding because for a number of weeks now we've been treating this system as being in the foraging mode, which in my mind basically means I'm not providing the system with any new bedding. But once in a while I like to cheat a little bit, especially when I've got a nice brand new coffee filter that we could deploy as a replacement feeding zone indicator, which is the case right here. So perhaps we'll deviate ever so slightly by giving them the old feeding zone indicator as something that they might be able to consider as perhaps not so much bedding, but at least the type of material from which you normally make your system's bedding. A more carbon-rich material versus the nitrogen-rich kitchen scraps, which make up their feeding. But essentially, it's probably safe to say that we've continued on here without really giving them any new bedding. So guess what I just did there again? I can already hear you guys out there in the audience probably saying, look at him, what an airhead. How can he be such an unattentive worm dad? I'll admit, guilty as charged. Oh man, whatever. I guess there were just some distractions here with the black soldier flies or whatever my excuse is. I don't know, there's no excuse for that, right? I'm an airhead, just what it is. And like last time, the plastic coated cardboard's not going back on. We'll just come right back on here with the paper top. And you might have already noticed that I didn't even go into the opposite edge of the bin to see what's going on. Sometimes I like to do that. Sometimes I just like to leave things be without fiddling with it. And then, you know, perhaps next time we'll get a chance to see how things look over there. But that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. So I'll get stuff put away. I'll release those black soldier flies out into the wild, and then my day will be done. All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye now.